Welcome everyone, this is Mr. Gee again with a video that hopefully will be a good review over the 4.4A quiz. We took this the day before we went on Christmas break, and I think 2 days before we went on Christmas break, and we're going to be doing a retake this week. So for a review, what I've done is this video where people can go at their own speed and take a look at the quiz that they've got back and the problems that they missed and why. So you should have a set of headphones on, you should have a computer on setting in at this video, and you should be able to do a little bit better. So I'll go through this rather slow and very deliberate, and hopefully this will help many of you to do a little bit better. Go ahead and zoom in a little bit closer. And let's go ahead and get started on problem number 1. It says, graph the data and find the rate of change. Be sure that your rate of change is labeled with the correct units of measurement. Answer any additional questions. So problem number 1 reads, and we've done a lot of these, after 45 baseball games, Reggie had 65 hits, and after 120 games, he had 170 hits. Answer the questions below. Show all work. Use the formula below to find the number of hits per each game. Round your answer to the nearest tenth. Well, let me go over some of the things that some of you did wrong. Some of you just didn't get it right off the very beginning, so you didn't have a chance to get the problem. Some of you took games and subtracted hits from it. That's not what you're supposed to do. It's games subtract games and hits subtract hits. Some of you put hits on the bottom and then you put games on the top, and so you didn't come up with the right units, number of hits per game. Some of you didn't round correctly, so you missed this. So as we go through this first part right here, take a look at those and see if you did those right. And if you didn't, make sure when we do the retake that you remember exactly what you're supposed to do. So let's go ahead and finish part A here. So it says, use a formula below to find the number of hits per each game. Round your answer to the nearest tenth. Well, we know that 45 baseball games, we had 65 hits. So that's our first ordered pair. 120 games, we had 170 hits. So that's our second ordered pair. So the games are going to go along with the X's, and the hits are going to be the Y's. And there's a couple of reasons why you know that. It's because if you look here at the formula, I say the vertical change is hits minus hits. Well, we know the rate of change is the Y's over the X's. Okay, so vertical change goes up and down with the Y's. Horizontal change goes left from right for the X's. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at this formula now. So vertical change would be hits minus hits, so that would be 170 hits minus 65 hits. And then I have the games. I have 120 games minus 45 games. Now, if you came up with this correct number here of 170 minus 65 would be 105 hits. Divided by 120 minus 45 would be 75 games. If you did this correctly, you got 3 points. That was worth 3 points. Now we want to convert this to how many units per game, and that's where you divide 75 into the top and 75 into the bottom. And when you do this, you get 1.4. You don't have to, there's no mark there. There was really nothing to round to the nearest tenth. I tried to make that simple. So you have 1.4 hits per one game. Now some of you didn't use your units on this, and this part right here was worth 3 points. And if you didn't do that correctly by using your units and everything, or you came up with the wrong number, if you came up with the wrong number, I didn't give you anything. If you missed the labeling it correctly. I probably only gave you maybe 2 points instead of 3. So now part B, it says, what is the rate of hits per game, per 10 games? Well, we know that if I want 10 games, I've got 1.4. Then I have 1 game. We'll get to get 1 game up to 10 games, I have to multiply the bottom by 10. Therefore, I have to multiply the top by 10. So that gives me 14 hits per 10 games. So this is important because this tells us how we're going to count. The hits, each one of these units are going to be worth 14. And then each one of these squares here for games will be worth 10. Some of you counted this really strange. You used 10. Some of you used 20 along here. Some of you used the units was just really crazy on how some of you counted. I tried to make this easy by just making these nice and straightforward. And one thing that I told many of you and asked you to go back and relabel it is that you had to start your graph here, you had to start at 45 games, and over here you had to start at 65 hits. Some of you started at some other number and you went way too low. It was too low to get the numbers you needed to do parts C and D. Some of you went way too high. Some of you didn't label these consistent along the bottom where you were counting by 10s and you counted by 20s and you went back to 10s. It was really kind of strange. I also put these little tick marks here to maybe give you a hint of how you ought to count by. See, if you look right here, that each one of those, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, if each one of those are worth 10, because this is right games. Now, how do I know games are along the bottom? It's because games is my independent unit. Well, independent goes along with the x's. I know it's hits along the sides because hits is my dependent variable, and dependent variable is always the y's. Okay, so these are supposed to be 10s along the bottom, so each from here to here is 40, from here to here is 40, from here to here is 40, from here to here is 40. So I just have to add 40 each time to 45. So that will be 85. Add 40 there will be 125. And so forth, 165. 205. Now some of you missed counting right here. You went fine along here, and then all of a sudden, I don't know what happened between here and here, you started counting weird. And the last one is 245. Now I gave you the same kind of help along here. I gave you those tick marks right there. So that says from here to here I had to use 4 of these. Well, what is each one of these worth? Well, it says right here the units for the hits are 14 each. So each one of these squares are worth 14. So let's relabel those and let's see what happens. So I got 14, 14, 14, and 14. Well, 4 times 14, what is that? Well, let's go 4 times 14. Take your calculator. 4 times 14 is 16. That's 40. Well, it should be 56. So each one of these units here should increase by 56, going vertically. Well, if you take 65, you add 56 to it, you get 121. Add another 56 to it, you get 177. Add another 56, and you just keep going up. Now I get 233. The next one would be 289. And then the last one would be 345. So when we do the retake, once you get these numbers right here, you're going to use these to count your y-axis, you're going to use these to count your x-axis, and just go ahead and use them. It'll work out fine. And remember, if I don't give you the starting position, if I don't tell you what numbers to use here for the begin your graph, you always use the lowest ordered pair. Okay. All right, let's clean this up a little bit right here, and we'll keep going. Okay, now let's go ahead. We know we're supposed to have a line along here somehow. So I know if I go over 4, that's 40. If I go over 40, I also have to go up 56. So now this is how my graph should go. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Then 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then up 1, 2, 3, 4. And so there's the diagonal that we know we're supposed to have. Some of you just go ahead and instinctively draw it, which is fine. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. We're right. So there's the diagonal. So every time I go over 40, I go up 56. I go over 40, I go up 56, because each one of these are worth 14, each one of these are worth 10. Now some of you went ahead and used 10 going along here, then you use 20. Well, you can't use that. You can't use 20 along the top, because every time I go over 10, how far am I supposed to go up? I'm supposed to go up 14. I can't go up 20. And so your grass along this side went up way too fast. And then somehow you came up with the right numbers, but you didn't do your graph right, and there's no way you could come up with those numbers, and you kind of fudged things or kind of cheated on the numbers to try to get it to come out with what you know it should have been, because you were able to check your work. Let me mark those there. Okay, so let's go ahead and draw this line right here. So we know this diagonal starts there on that corner. And then once I get this diagonal drawn, I can go ahead and answer parts C and D. So it says estimate the number of hits made in 200 games. Well, games is along the x-axis. Well, I know this is 205 games. Well, that's close enough to 200. So what I'm going to do is follow this line up. There's where it hits this diagonal line, so this tells me how this is supposed to map over or convert over to how many hits. Well, it gives me about, for 205 games, I get 289 hits. So for an answer, I took anything from about 280 up to about maybe 285. So if you hit somewhere around 280, 285, I gave you 3 points. And also, if you labeled your graph correctly, I also gave you 3 points for setting up your graph correctly. Some of you, I don't know how to help you. You just need to study this video. So if I go over here and I look at 205 games, that's close to 200 games. 200 games, each one of these are worth 10. 200 games would actually be worth hit right there if you wanted to get really exact on this. Each one of these are worth 7, so that's halfway between in the 7, so 7 minus 0 would give me, right around 282 games. Would be really the exact answer by looking at the graph. Okay, let's go down and look at part D. Let me raise this up. It says estimate the number of games he will have to play to make 300 hits. Well, some of you looked at this and your graph didn't go up to 300 hits, so you added some at the top and tried to finagle it around. Well, that's not the way that we do it. So we know that this is 289. This is the closest one I have to 300. So if I take 289, and I know each one of these units right here are worth 14, well, take 289 and add 14 to it. And that gives us 303. Well, 303 is really close to 300. So if I take this line at 303, Now, some of you went down here, you thought that you had to start at 303 over here and go up and over. Well, these are the games. I'm telling you to start at the hits. So here you've got to kind of go backwards. I start here at the hits. I trace it over to the diagonal line. Then I trace it down. There we go. So each one of these are worth 10. So 10 plus 205 gives me 215. So that's how many hits, or how many games it will take him to get 300 hits. So that's 215 games. Okay. So most everybody, when they did this, they did okay on part A and part B, but you did not understand what you needed to do to go ahead and take the information from B, translate it to the graph. And I know if you can graph it right, most of you know how to read it. So you start at your games, transverse it over to your Y's, and if I ask you for hits and how many games for that many hits, you have to go backwards the other way. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Okay, why don't we go ahead and move over to number 2. Let me pause the video for a second and we'll go ahead and get this set up. So number 2, it simply wants you to list the ordered pair for each of the points on the graph. So if we look at A, we have to pick off the X and the Y. If we look at D, we just have to pick off how far we count over on the X and how far we count down on the Y. These have nothing to do with slope. Some of you thought you were trying to figure slope here and you wrote your ordered pair as fractions. That's not what we're doing here. So you've got to pay attention to what's being asked, and you have to be more attentive of the vocabulary that you need to know. So let's go ahead and do this one. So if I look at A, on the x-axis I count over one. I count the squares, not the tick marks. So 1, 2, 3. So that is going in the negative direction, right? So that's a -3. And then if I look at the y, I start here at the y, that goes up. Count the squares, not the tick marks. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 squares. Some of you count the tick marks and you don't count the tick marks right. So that's the correct answer for A. Now let's go over to B. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's in the positive direction. And then if I count up, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in the positive direction. So that means that has to be 8 over 8. Not 8 over 8, but 8 comma 8 for that ordered pair. Okay, let me erase this and we'll go on to the next one. I don't know, a lot of you didn't get all of these right. Some of you did okay and got all of them right. Several students just didn't pay attention to the signs. So it was either all or nothing on these problems. So let's look at C. It looks like I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the negative direction. So that should have been a -6. And then I go down from the y at 0, so that'd be -1, -2. And so those of you that miss some of these, it just says that you're just not paying attention, that you think you know it and you don't. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 5 in the positive direction. And then I go down 1, 2, 3 in the negative y direction. So now let's do E. It looks like I go 1, 2 in the negative x direction. And then I go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and -8 in the y direction. And then finally F, I go over 1, 2 in the positive x direction, and then I go up 1, 2 in the positive y direction. So those are your answers for the first part of number 2, and each one of these were worth 1, so that was worth a possible 6. Most of you on this didn't do well. Some of you look at your paper, you didn't draw any lines on your graph. You didn't show the vertical component or the horizontal component, and I'll talk about that here in just a minute. Let me go ahead and erase this part of the screen. So this is the ideal. If we're going to find A and D, and the way that I always did these problems in class, I go ahead and I would draw the line segment that I want to find, and then I would always draw the vertical component. That's the distance between the y's, between A and where D is. You see how that's how far these two are apart? And then I would draw the vertical one, how far they are apart on the x-axis. So this is how far they change in the y's, this is how far they change in the x's. And some of you got the slope wrong because it's the y's over the x's, and what you did is switched them around. Some of you missed it because you never paid attention to the signs. So I'm going to go over some rules that will help you. First of all, when you count the slope, always count the y's first because it's on top. So if I count the y's first, let me change this to blue. So I count the squares, count the length of this triangle right here, count the vertical side first. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's a negative 10. Okay? So I'm going to put a negative 10. Some of you didn't pay attention to the sign. You just wrote 10. But you can see that it's going in the negative direction, right? And now if I do the x's, I start from where I ended up. I counted down from A, so always do your y's first, and then I'm going to go right for the x's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that slope is a negative 10 over 8. Now the top divides by 2, the bottom divides by 2, so that could simplify to negative 5 over 4. That's the correct answer for line segment A, AD. All right, so let's go ahead and erase this. Let's go ahead and do BE. So again, what I suggest that you do, and a lot of you don't think you're smarter than I am and you're going to do it the way you want, and some of you are smarter, but you just, I don't know why you end up doing these things wrong. So we draw our line segment between the 2 points to give us our line segment, and then we draw the 2 components. We're going to make the vertical and horizontal component. Now which one do we count first? We always count the vertical one first. So here I'm starting at B, so I count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And I counted down, so that means that's a negative 16 because I counted down. Now from where I counted from B down, that means I'm counting, and I start here and I'm going to count to the left, so that means I'm going to count in another negative direction. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's a negative 10. Well, we know a negative divided by a negative is a positive, so that's 16 over 10. We can divide the top by 2 and the bottom by 2, so that will end up being 8 over 5. Now some of you may say, well, Mr. Yee, that's not the way I counted it. Well, let's count it from E up to B. Now if you count this any other way, it's not going to work. So make sure that when you count it, if you count it from E, that you're going to count up, and then you're going to count to the right. So if I count this, I'll still get the same thing. I'll count up 10, but you can see that it's going in a positive direction, and then from there, if I count to the right, I'm counting in a positive direction. So that will give me a positive 10. That will give me a positive 16. We always count the y's first, write them on top, and then we count the x's second and write them on the bottom. And another thing that lets me know that I did this right, remember a positive slope goes up from left to right. Well, look at that line right there. What type of line is that? What type of slope is that? Well, it goes up from left to right. So that has to be a positive slope, and it matches what I've got here. Okay, let's go ahead and do the next one. So B and F, B and F. So B and F, B starts there. And then now let's draw our horizontal component, vertical component. Now which one do we count first? Always count the Y, the vertical change first. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's in the negative direction, so that'll be a negative 6. Now I'll count 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in a negative direction, so that's a negative 6 over 6, or it's 1. Now I could count it this other way. I could count up 6, then I could count from here. This is going up on the y-axis, so that would be a positive 6. I could count to the right on the x-axis. That would be a positive 6. You can see that it gives me the same slope. And I know it has to be positive because if I look here at the line, it goes up from left to right. So that's BF. And going back and looking at some of the quizzes, very few people got all these right. It's just like you thought it was easier than it was going to be, and you just didn't pay attention to detail. Okay, let's go ahead and let's look at CE. Oops, let me get my ruler out here. Straight line, so we do our vertical, our diagonal line segment. There's my vertical component, then my horizontal component. So now let's count. I'm going from C to E, I'm going down on the Y, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's in the negative direction, so that will be a negative 6. And then I count to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the X. So that divides by 2, that divides by 2, so that slope was a negative 3 over 2. It's the correct slope. Now let's do the last one here. We're going to do A and E. Now this is kind of tricky because when you look at the lines, it looks like E is right over A. But when you draw your vertical components and you draw your horizontal component, they're not, are they? Well, if I count from here down to here, I can see that's 15. But that's going in a negative direction, so that has to be a negative 15. And then the vertical component is 1, so that slope is a negative 15 over 1, or you could just write a negative 15. So each one of these are worth 1. So number 2 was worth a total of, what, 11 points. Okay. So some things to remember when you do this is that when you write your slope, remember it's your y's over your x's. In other words, it's the vertical divided by the horizontal. Make sure that you draw your line segment first. Then you do your horizontal and vertical components. And then you always count the vertical first, write it on top. Count the horizontal second, and write it on the bottom. And then you simplify to get your slopes. Okay, we're moving on to problems number 3. Let me move this up a little bit. Let's see here. I want this to... Let me turn on my pen here. Let me resize this for just a second. Okay, there we go. It says find the slopes between each ordered pair and then decide if the points are linear. First of all, some of you never found the slopes between each ordered pair. I told you not to do it the same way that you did it on the worksheet review. I want you to find the slope between each one of these ordered pair, even if they're the same. And I explain that. Then decide if the points are linear. Now you know they're linear if they have the same slope. It says simplify all fractions to their lowest term. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started. Let me get my right layer on here. There we go. So let's look at number 3, the first part here, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit farther. Okay, so you got to find the slope between all 3 of these. Well, let's do the x's first. There's the x's, there's their y's, and remember the slope is you put the y's on top, the x's on the bottom, and again, some of you did them different. You switched them. You don't switch them. The y's on top, the x's on the bottom. So let's just do the y's first because that's going to go on top. So you can start at the top. So 12 to 6, that's down by 6. 6 to 9, that's up by 3. Now I go 5 to 15, that's up by 10. 15 to 10, that's down by -5. So now let's write our slope for this first set. Well, that's a -6 over 10. Well, 2 divides the top, 2 divides the bottom, so that's a -3 over 5. Now let's look at this slope. This is y's on the top. Some of you said that this was a no, that they weren't linear, but are they linear? Look at those 2 slopes right there. Yeah, this negative's in the bottom, so what? It's still a negative number, so this is 3 over -5 and -3 over 5. They're equivalent slopes. So yes, this is linear. Most of you put no because you never paid attention to these. Some of you, when you wrote the slope, you wrote it 10 over -6 and you wrote a -5 over 3. You didn't get it right because you didn't you switched these around just like I said. Okay, let's go over to the next part of this. There we go. Let's move these over. Okay, I have 22. Remember, these are the x's and these are the y's, and I want to go the y's over the x's. 22 to 14, that looks like that goes down by 8. From 14 to 6, that's down by 8. 6 to a -2, that's down by 8. And a -2 to a -10, that's down by 8. Now we have to check the x's. 6 to 3, that's down by 3. 3 to 0, that's down by 3. 0 to -4, that's down by 4. And a -4 to a -6, that's down by 2. So some of you said, oh, these aren't linear, and you wrote no, which was fine, but you missed some points. Why? Because you didn't write me the slope. That slope is a -8 over a -3. That slope's a -8 over a -3. That slope's a -8 over a -4. And that slope's a -8 over a -2. Well, that's 8 over 3. That's 8 over 3. That slope is 2 over 1. And this slope is 4 over 1. You just didn't give me the slopes. And I don't think I marked anybody wrong for not simplifying these, but I would like you to simplify them to their lowest form. That's what it says right there, but I didn't mark it wrong. Okay, so this would have been a no because it fails right here and right here. And again, some of you didn't get credit on these because you didn't give me the slopes. All you showed me was the differences. All right, 15 to 11. Remember, these are x's and y's. I always want to put the y on top, the x on the bottom. So that's down by 4. That's down by 4. That's down by 4. And that's down by 4. I think this was the easiest of the 3. This goes down by 9, down by 9, down by 9, and down by 9. So all these changes, some of you just said, oh, it's 4 over 9 for everything. Some of you missed the sign either on here or here. You didn't put the sign. That's 4 over 9, negative 9, or you could write 4 over 9. 4 over 9. Slope is 4 over 9. 4 over 9. So is this linear? Yes, this is linear. So I think this one was worth 1, 2, 3, 4. This was worth 5. This was worth 5. And this one over here was worth 3. So that problem was worth 15 points. Okay. All right, let's go down and look at number 2 or number 4, and then we'll be done with this. I'm glad to say that most everybody did really good on number 4. Very few people missed it. Some of you missed it because you're just careless. I don't know what to say. Just be a little bit more careful. All right, I'm going to zoom in on this and move this up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure the points. I'm going to figure the equations first, and then I'll figure the 2 points and the set of points for each one, and then we'll do the graph. Okay, it says rewrite the following equations as y in terms of x. Calculate a table of 3 ordered pair, and graph and label the lines for each equation on the coordinate plane. Simplify all fractions to the lowest terms. So we know the first step is we have to get rid of the x term, so that's a negative 4x. So I'm going to add 4x to each side. Some of you just missed the sign right here off the bat. You had a negative 4x here. Oh, negative 4x there, I just move it over there. No, that's not what you do. You use your algebra. If that's a negative, we do the additive inverse. We want to get this to go to 0. So whatever you have there, you do the opposite of it to get it to go to 0. And then we also do it on the other side. So now that equation becomes 9y equals 4x plus 27. Now we divide each side by 9. So that first equation should be y equals 4 over 9x plus 3. Some of you missed the sign on this. Some of you missed the sign on that. I don't know what to tell you. All right, on here we have a negative 5x, so we're going to add 5x to get that to go to 0. We added 5x here. We're going to add 5x there. Then we divide by a positive 2 to everything. We know that that's gone, right? So now that equation is y equals 5 over 2x minus 5. Some of you missed the sign right there, so your equation was all wrong. So now let's do our ordered pair. I got 4 over 9 x plus 3. I know each one of these are going to have a plus 3 to it. So all I have to do is figure out what's 4 over 9 and then choose my x's. Well, we know the denominator is 9, so the x's that we want to choose are like a 9, 0, and 9. Some of you chose 3. I don't know why you chose 3. 3 divides 9, but it's not a multiple of 9. So if I put 9 into here, I'm going to go down here and show this math. Well, that gives me a negative 36, right? What's a negative 36 divided by 9? Well, it's a negative 4. So a negative 4 plus 3 is a negative 1. Okay? All right, let's erase this and we'll do the other one. All right, so we got 0, 0 is easy, right? Because I put 0 in here. 0 times anything is 0, so 0 plus 3 is 3. Now let's do the positive 9. I've got 4 over 9 times 9. So 4 times 9 is 36. 36 over 9 is a positive 4. So 4 plus 3 is 7. So our ordered pair, let me write this over here because we're going to need it here in a minute, is negative 9 and negative 1. and 0 and 0 and 3, and then I've got 9 and 7. Okay, let's do the ordered pair for B. So I have 5 over 2 minus 5. I know a negative 5 is going to be here everywhere. Okay, so I'm going to choose, some of you chose 5 for here. 5 won't work. The only thing that will work is multiples of 2. So I'm going to choose a negative 2, 0, and 2. So let's put a negative 2 in here. So 5 halves times negative 2, well, that gives me a negative 10 over 2. So that has to be a negative 5. Some of you messed up the number right here. Well, a negative 5 minus 5 is a negative 10. You just messed up on the ordered pair on this one. We know that's going to be 0, so 0 minus 5 is a negative 5. And now I'm going to put a positive 2 in here. Well, if I put a positive 2 in there, that's going to change that to a positive 10. That will make that a 5. So 5 minus 5 is 0. So our ordered pair for B, write this right here, would be a negative 2 and a negative 10. Would be 0 and a negative 5. And would be 2 and 0. Alright, now we're ready for the graphing part, right? Let me get my window up here. Okay, slide this over. So let's count our ordered pair. Let's do A first. So I have a negative 9 and a negative 1. Well, this is on the x-axis, these are on the y's. So negative 9 on the x would give me over here, and then I go down 1. So there's that first ordered pair. Then I have 0 and 3. So 0 on the x, so it stays right there, and up 3 on the y. And the last one is 9 on the x, and then up 7. So 9, there's 5 plus 4, 9, and then up 7 would give me right there. So there's that first line. So let's go ahead and draw it. It's my ruler. So I put that right there and that right there. And I'd just like to say that most of you, I'd say 90% of the people did the graph correctly. So there's line A. Let me get this window toolbar up. And so line A should come down here between a negative 1 and negative 2, and up here between, looks like 8 and 7. Okay, now let's do B. So B starts at a negative 2 on the x and a negative 10 all the way down there. Then I 0 on the x, so it's right there, 0 on the x, and then down negative 5. And then it goes up 2 on the x, and I don't go anywhere on the y. It stays at 0. So there's line B. Let's go ahead and draw this. I can't see that. Well, I guess I can't see that point down there, so I can't use it. Let's just use these two. So I start there. So there's line B right there. Some of you just didn't have the right lines, and on this one it was all or nothing. Either you got the lines right or you didn't get any points. So there's where B should have went. There's where line A should have went, and each one of those are worth, say, 10 points there, 10 points there. So let's see on number 1 we had 15. Number 2 we had 11. Number 3 we had 13. And then number 4 we had 20. So if we add all those up, that's 9. That gave us 59 points, raw points. And then I counted scaled it back to where we take it out of 55, and then the number that I put in the grade book was 50. So if you got 100, you got 55 out of 50. Some of you got 51 out of 50, so you got some extra credit. So everybody got the same amount of extra credit, and how much it affected your grade was determined by how high a score you got. So you can read this, watch this video at home. I'll put the 4.4a quiz on the internet, where you can download it at home, and you can go over it to Tuesday evening, Wednesday evening, and then on Thursday we'll go ahead and have the quiz. And I know this video is kind of long. You can skip and go to the points that you need to pay attention to, and hopefully that will help you. Thank you, and have a good afternoon, and good luck on the retake.